for 2025. Here's the list. Bills and the MVP at 1. Then the Bake Show at 2. Ravens, Commanders, Lions, even though Ben Johnson's gone. The Broncos, Super Bowl champion Eagles at 7. Packers, Bengals, who did have a high-flying offense and no defense last year. Oh, by the way, Trey Hendrickson, there's no news.
No, but Shamar Stewart left camp.
He left.
That's big news.
That's big news.
Yeah, he doesn't have a contract. It's like the reason I'm not there. I'm not under contract. And then at 10.
Which Wilds thinks is too high.
Well, not me.
No, you think it's too high.
It's the statistics.
That's exactly right.
Here were the Chiefs' ranks last year.
Yeah, wasn't that good?
15th in points, 16th in total yards, 23rd in yards per play, red zone touchdown percentage, which Mahomes used to like really butter his bread on that one, tied for 22nd, and large plays, 20 or more, 27th.
Yep.
So actually a very kind ranking to have them at 10 based on Rashee Rice, I guess.
Well, no. So that's
that was just my own take.
Based on Hollywood Brown, Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy not being a rookie, based on them actually having a left tackle, based on they don't think their top 3 running backs are all going to get hurt to start the year, based on all of that, and based on Patrick Mahomes being better than he was last year. Here's what I'm going to say. I'm going to do a similar thing that I did with when Jalen Hurts was ranked 10th, and I'm going to pick one team because I'm not sitting here saying that you should predict the Chiefs are going to have the best offense in the NFL. I don't know they're going to have the best offense in the NFL. The Chiefs, I will shave my head.
No, we don't want you to shave your head.
I know you don't want me to. Luckily, you won't have to. If the Chiefs don't have a better offense than the Denver Broncos,
Knew it.
pick the stakes. Now, listen, I think Philly is too low on this list.
Yeah,
I think Green Bay's too high. I'm very interested about
Cincinnati. I think is too low.
Not
everybody back.
I have questions about. I don't know. I think Cincinnati's offense last year, part of it, they don't want the offense to be as good as it was last year.
Much.
You know, part of it was like we're only involved in shootouts. As much as I love Baker, I think Tampa's a touch high there. And I think Green Bay, I'm not as bullish on Green Bay as this list is, but if the Kansas City Chiefs have a worse offense than Denver Broncos, it's just say it out loud.
I know it's strange.
Like it's not, and I forget who wrote this list because we did it. Judy Batista did the Dark Horse MVP. I forget this one, so I apologize. It's just an outrageous take. And again, I am not making excuses because you don't have to make excuses for a team that lost one game all year and made it to the Super Bowl. But to evaluate last year's Chiefs as if they were not far and away the most injured skill position team in the league is, in my opinion, disingenuous. When it's using it to project forward.
Yeah.
That's all. Like as far as looking at last year as indicative of next year, it would be no different than if a team that if Saquon retired in the offseason. It's like, well, the Eagles were the number 1 running team last year, so no reason they won't be again. Like something that is materially different last year to this year. So I think that's crazy personally.
Last year, and to me, I know total offense is yards. So I don't know if that's what they're talking about, but yards can be deceiving. Yeah, points. You showed it. Kansas City was 15th last year, 15th the year before when they won the Super Bowl. Last year, Denver was ahead of them in points. They were 10th. And that people are looking at it like Bo Nix was a rookie. Sean Payton, working with this new kid. They're going to be better going forward. I don't think Denver's going to have a better offense, but I didn't feel like they had a better offense last year, and they did finish higher in the rankings. I also feel like, look, Rashee Rice, if he's got the issues, legally, we'll see. I don't know what that is.
Doesn't seem like the NFL's doing anything about
it.
Right.
I don't know. Maybe that's a non-issue. I think he's huge because I think last year he would have tore it up. So I think this year he's going to be great. But let's just see what he does. Hollywood Brown is hurt a decent amount of time. I mean, last year was an outlier and only playing 2 games, but he was hurt a few years before that. Xavier Worthy, I think will be much better. I don't think he's going to be like an all-pro type receiver.
Agreed.
And then Kelsey's older. And I have faith in Mahomes, but it's like I said, Nick, like, to me, this is the last year where if you go out and have another mediocre regular season, statistically, this is the last year we can just say, give you the benefit of the doubt as far as being the best individually. Maybe people will still pick the Chiefs if they win with defense and just mediocre offense, or he picks it up in the playoffs. So I don't think it's that insulting just based on what they've done. I thought Mahomes was going to come out last year and have the light show, as he's called it, and win the MVP. He was our preseason pick for MVP. I do think he's going to do it again, but I've been waiting now 2 years, and I really would like to see it happen this year. But I don't think this preseason ranking is like that insulting based on what they've done the last few years.
Yeah, let's talk about this, because this is actually a really interesting conversation that I'm really excited to have, because, right, the question is like, how are we ranking and defining the 10th best offense? Is it on points? Is it on yards? Is it based on thoughts and feelings? Is it statistics? Is it based on matchups? Because, I mean, teams that are able to run the score up on you, against other teams, lesser teams, could technically be ranked higher. Like the Detroit Lions had an awesome offense. And I think here, we can just go to the most recent, the rankings from 2024. Now, technically speaking, most of the time when you see rankings for the number one defense, number one offense, whatever it is, usually, in my experience looking at all the various stat sites, it typically is based off of points scored and points allowed. Okay? And you know what? This is actually the regular season and the postseason, so that's going to be a little bit misleading. So let's just do regular season, because postseason, obviously, you're having a different level of games. Yeah, like look how much that just straight up changed it now. Technically speaking, the Detroit Lions had the best offense. Technically speaking. When push comes to shove, right, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers had the fourth best. Better than the Eagles, better than the Chiefs. The Chiefs were ranked 15th, as they discussed. It's like going into a game, who would you what offense would you rather have? It's the playoffs. It's the wild card. We don't know the defense situation, or even if we do, it's like, who would you rather have? And it's like, are you going to choose the Green Bay Packers with Jordan Love and the cast of characters that he had over the Kansas City Chiefs? Even the Los Angeles Rams? I mean, the Los Angeles Rams were 20th. Like, it's just, I care about also how you play against teams that are also great and not just bad. The Detroit Lions ran the score up on a lot of really, really bad teams. For instance, the Philadelphia Eagles obviously had an awesome offense, as proven in the playoffs, but they did not really run the score up. Does that mean that they didn't have a good offense? Like, of course not. And the thing that I'll call Nick out for, though, is, and I'm going to be defending the Chiefs here big time, but like Nick said, oh, it's disingenuous to talk about, not talk about the Chiefs' injuries and this or that. And it's like, but that's nonsense. Because it's disingenuous to not talk about the fact that Brock Purdy and the 49ers were decimated with injuries. Jordan Love and the Green Bay Packers dealt with injuries. Jalen Hurts and the Philadelphia Eagles. Jalen Hurts was concussed. A.J. Brown missed like 4 or so games, 5 games, whatever the final number was. Devontae missed like 4, was missing games. Like, you had also players. I'm not saying that they were injured as much as, say, the Chiefs, but it's just like, why don't you talk about the other teams that dealt with injuries as well? And you didn't. C.J. Stroud, his O-line was awful, and he had all of his receivers getting injured as well. All 3 of them. And his running back. You made fun of him. You made fun of C.J. Stroud all season long. And said the day after he gave advice to Caleb Williams, it was all downhill, and just made fun of him. So no, you don't get to say, come on, guys, let's talk about injuries. Like, that's disingenuous, as he stated. But if I'm looking at this team, and you say, like, let's use the Chargers as an example. Last season, if you're like, what offense would you rather have, the Chargers or the Kansas City Chiefs? I'm picking the Kansas City Chiefs. In a gotta-have-it game, it's the wild card, divisional. Like, we don't have to get too high with this. It's just a game that matters. We're not talking like Super Bowl, like to try, just a playoff game, an important playoff game, obviously. All playoff games are important. It's like, who would you rather have? The Atlanta Falcons offense or the Kansas City Chiefs? The Arizona Cardinals or the Kansas City Chiefs? Now, to be fair, I was banging the drum that this team was very much led by their defense. And I think that is pretty clear. But you can't take away that this offense still understood how to win important games. Now, in the beginning of the season, Patrick Mahomes, that offense was really bad, even before the injuries started piling up. Like it was interception. I mean, they went 9-0, and Patrick Mahomes almost had as many interceptions as touchdowns. And the defense stepped up. There was games, Patrick Mahomes won back-to-back games where he had 0 touchdowns and multiple interceptions. It was the 49ers and I forget the game before. I think it was the game against the Saints, I think. So we know how important, obviously, defense is. We know that. But that's why it's like when just looking at stats and when you're also not combining it with your defense and what your team needs from you. And so that's why, like, the rankings, is it like, is it just based off of pure stats? Or is it how we truly feel about this offense? Are we actually, like, how are we actually technically evaluating how good is this offense? And then you could technically say, okay, I believe that for some reason it only names the 9 teams, but the Chiefs as the 10th. You could say, well, you know what? They're in a really tough division. And the Broncos should have an awesome defense. And the Chargers have an awesome defense. That's potentially 4 low-scoring games, potentially. And so, therefore, they're going to maybe still win those games, but score a lot less points, and therefore their rankings will go down, or whatever it may be. I think, again, if you're looking at it strictly statistically, I could understand that. And same thing while you're talking about the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills have arguably the easiest schedule in the NFL. And so you're like, this team should put up a ton of points. Maybe they don't technically have a better offense than, say, the Ravens or the Lions or the Eagles, but statistically, they're going to have a lot higher a higher rated offense. And I think that's totally fair game. Like, that's why these lists in this conversation is a little bit confusing. And misleading for that matter. But I mean, if we think about the Chiefs, and with all of their injuries that they had, right, they were still just even statistically, they were still the 5th ranked offense. But it's like, when they got a little bit healthier, they played better. But they didn't, move mountains against the Texans. They played great against the Buffalo Bills, put up a lot of points. But then they went up against a great defense against the Eagles, and they obviously got rocked. And they did have Hollywood Brown, and they did have DeAndre Hopkins. They did have Travis Kelce, etc., etc. But I'm just not betting on this offense being bad year after year after year. But the reality is that I don't think top 10 is somehow in any way insulting. I'm not getting too lost in the Packers and the Cincinnati Bengals and all these other teams, because I'm just kind of like, I don't know. In a lot of ways, I've reduced things into categories. Like I know everyone loves top 10 lists. It's just not how my mind works. So I have like one category where I'm like, yeah, they're a top 10 offense, top 10 defense. That means they're a really, really good, even great offense or defense. And then I go, yeah, then you got top 5. And it's like, that means you're awesome. And then I got you at top 2. And that means like, you are elite, you are special. I'm banking on you coming up big in big moments. And it's not to say that when I say top 10, top 5, in a lot of ways, that's my way of saying like, A, B, C. Like it's its own tiers, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. It's not necessarily in order. So I think this offense can be really good. Do I think this offense is, if they have, more or less points or yards than the Washington Commanders or something? or the Denver Broncos. Like it's less interesting to me in a lot of ways. I think when you're having these greater conversations, when you're talking about why did the Ravens lose or something, and people say, oh, it was their defense, and you're like, well, they had a top 10 defense, like that should be good enough or something, you know, like I think in that kind of scope of things it makes sense. Or if you're talking about how great a team is and you're like, hey, this team was historically great, or this team's offense had, you know, they scored the most points in the entire NFL, or, you know, whatever it is, or the, you know, the Eagles, for instance, they beat the Chiefs, right? And the Chiefs had an elite defense. They had a top-ranked, top 2, top 3 in terms of points allowed, and that's also a little bit skewed because they obviously sat everyone against the Broncos in the final game, so you'd have to like subtract that out. But obviously, like a top game, so you could say, yeah, the Eagles beat, you know, this top defense, like that means something in those conversations. But it's not, again, it's not 100% all or nothing. It's not the Bible here. So that, again, that's why these conversations get a little wonky. And that's why I'm only going to treat it like, that's the thing. Like Nick always treats everything as so insulting, or just like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. And it's just like, you know, they were healthy the year before in 23, and they had Rashee Rice, and you can't say, well, he was a rookie. Nick kept saying that he was absolutely unbelievably amazing. No one was saying that Travis Kelce's old and slow, especially not Nick. And you know, you had Patrick Mahomes being Patrick Mahomes, and Andy Reid being Andy Reid, and that defense being great. And yet in 23, what was their offense? 15 again. So, and listen, I think it'll be better. So saying that them being top 10 isn't somehow insulting or ridiculous, if they're going based off of just these numbers, mathematically, it makes sense. Because first year starter, because like this is my point. You can say, oh, well, Rashee Rice was this and that, and who did he have? Like, who did Jordan Love really have? And this was his first year being a starter, and he put up more points. Trevor Lawrence didn't even play the whole season, put up more points. C.J. Stroud, rookie quarterback, put up more points. Tua, more points. Indianapolis Colts, well, that was the year when they had Gardner Minshew as their quarterback, if I believe. And first-year head coach Shane Steichen put up more points. So you can't just say, oh, well, Patrick Mahomes, who did he have? Who is Gardner Minshew? Okay? Like, seriously, come on. Like, what are we talking about here? The Saints quarterback in 23, was that Derek Carr? I don't even know if was it Derek Carr? Like, I can't even remember at this point. I think it was Derek Carr. I don't think he finished the whole season. I don't even remember. But that's my point. So that's why you can't just be so quick to say, well, they had this, and what about this guy, and what about it? What about these other teams? So, again, if we're doing statistical rankings, then it's not insulting. It just makes sense mathematically. You know, Joe Flacco was the quarterback for like the, 8 games or whatever with the Cleveland Browns. You know, there's plenty of these examples here. So you can't just blame like injuries and this or that. You can't do it that way. But now, even Patrick Mahomes, with all the injuries that his offense was dealing with, it's like he still was top 7. And again, it's like, it is interesting that you have someone like Geno Smith up there. And it's like, Geno Smith didn't have a stacked roster. He didn't have an amazing O-line. He was pressured a tremendous amount, and yet he threw for more yards. And I'm not saying that Geno Smith is better than Patrick Mahomes, but it's like, that's why my point is you can't keep pointing to other things. Baker Mayfield, his offense got decimated with injuries. Threw for more yards. Threw for more touchdowns. Do you think Baker Mayfield's better than Patrick Mahomes? I do not think so. I do not think so. Especially when the moments matter most. And that's why you just can't go by yards, because look, here we go. Patrick Mahomes, top 7 in yards, top 9 in touchdowns. High up there in interceptions. I think he would be, this is a little bit harder with the bottom. Where's he at? 12. So that would be, so that would be bottom 12 then. Yeah. And that was obviously an imperfect year. So if you do have Rashee Rice, if you do have Pacheco, if you do have Worthy, and even an old Kelsey, I have to imagine this is going to be higher. I have to imagine he will be around here. I have to imagine that he could be as good as Geno Smith, okay? I have to imagine that. And in terms of touchdowns, if you look at the players that are above him, Aaron Rodgers with the New York Jets, okay? It's like, I have to imagine. Now, some of these other guys above, you can make sense. Less so Josh Allen, less so Bo Nix, but Sam Darnold obviously had a great offense. Jared Goff obviously fleshed with weapons. Baker Mayfield is the most interesting one because he had his weapons, but he also didn't for much of the year, so you'd have to kind of really do the math and look back on that. Lamar Jackson obviously being Lamar, and Joe Burrow obviously being Jamar. Joe Burrow being Joe Burrow. I don't know where that, having Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, that's where that came from. I think there is, just because we saw that Patrick Mahomes isn't 100% unstoppable and inevitable no matter who's around him, because I think there was that feeling, and even Nick Wright admitted that after the Super Bowl, that this bubble of invincibility has been popped. That was Nick Wright's take himself. Like, he said that. I think there is a deeper understanding now that even Patrick Mahomes needs support around him. But this is where I always say you can't have it both ways. You can't say, oh, Patrick Mahomes had no help, and that's why he kind of put up some of these numbers. But then, in the same conversation, be like, okay, but then, like, again, who did some of these other guys have? Aaron Rodgers didn't have, Devontae the whole year. Okay, he didn't have Andy Reid as his head coach. Okay, Baker Mayfield had all the injuries as well. Geno Smith had DK Metcalf. Great, congrats. He was also pressured a million times. Okay, number one in the NFL. 40 more times than Patrick Mahomes. Joe Burrow had some weapons, also had a terrible O-line. So it's, CJ Stroud, no weapons, and a terrible O-line. So yeah, it's a more complicated conversation than meets the eye. But to be very clear, I think the Kansas City Chiefs offense with Mahomes and company will have a significantly better offense than they did the year before. I think you're going to just get similar levels of success. I think when you keep winning all these close games and you're able to win even with a lot of these injuries and whatnot, when you have a great defense as a foundation, as well as obviously a great quarterback and high-level coaching, you're going to win games. Why? Because your coach and quarterback, regardless of the issues, is better than whoever Baker Mayfield has as his coach at the time, whoever Geno Smith has at the time. Even with Sam Darnold, great roster, and Kevin O'Connell, that pales in comparison to an Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. Aaron Rodgers, it's like, who the heck was his OC? It's just that's why you're gonna pick those guys. Who do you rather have? No matter where the O-line is, no matter what weapons you have, who would you rather go up against? CJ Stroud and a 33-year-old first-year offensive coordinator or second-year offensive coordinator, or Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid? Like, who would you rather have? The answer is obvious. And so that's always going to give the Chiefs a massive advantage. But yeah, I don't know. Like I keep saying, it's a bit of a weird, stranger conversation, because when looking at offenses and whatnot, it's like, I am very consistent that I care how you do against other great teams. It does not move the needle for me that the Dallas Cowboys can blow out a 2-win team, that the Detroit Lions run the score up against the Jags or the Carolina Panthers, but then another team like, the Eagles or even the Chiefs play it a lot closer. Now, if a team like the Chiefs, who was winning a lot of close games and was kind of struggling, and then had a close game against the Panthers and could have lost, and it was kind of like, you kind of got lucky there, and I'm just using that as an example, it's not like a statement, then I could say, okay, that's interesting. I can use that to help evaluate how I feel about a team. But if you're winning and you're in control of a lot of these games, but the score is just a little bit closer, I'm not like, oh, well, you're clearly not as good as a team like the Lions because they beat them by even more. It's like, well, it just doesn't mean anything to me. It just doesn't. So, and then it's always a moving target because it's also the quality of play when you're watching it. You know? Also, sometimes you feel one way when watching a game, like a week 7 game, and that's based off of how you felt about the team from weeks 1 through 4 or 5, whatever. And then you're like, wow, that was a weird win for the Eagles or for the Chiefs in week 7. Like, that was a close one. They played really badly. Like, I don't know, they're really not that good. But then you see what they look like in the following weeks, and you're like, oh no, that just was what it was. Whatever. It just kind of changes it. And how do you make sense of a team like the Buffalo Bills who can lay an egg against the Houston Texans, but then go beat an undefeated Chiefs team? Like you're just constantly trying to put this in perspective, and that's another long-winded way of saying, like, well, then how do we rank the best offense or the best defense? Because sometimes an offense is going to play great against another great defense or a great team because their defense has been forcing a lot of 3 and outs, a lot of great short fields and whatnot, a blocked field goal, blocked punt, a huge special teams return. So, it's a weird one, but I don't think that this is proof of any doubt of the Kansas City Chiefs or that this is ridiculous or this is insane. I get why Nick singles out the Denver Broncos because it's in division and it's fun to do. And I'm going to make a separate video talking all about the Broncos and how the Broncos are predicted to be better than the Chiefs. And I'm going to talk about it through the lens of, through the lens of how the Broncos should feel about that and why I think they could potentially, get there. But I think the Chiefs will be in a really good spot next year. I think it's kind of comical that so many people think that there's going to be this downfall, that they're going to only win like 7 or 8 games, or that Patrick Mahomes, it's like, has Patrick Mahomes shown to be invincible, no longer, to not truly be invincible? Yes. Has Patrick Mahomes been exposed as a secretly like a bad quarterback who's just been propped up by a great team? Like, no, that hasn't been the case. And I encourage you guys, when you guys comment, to not just automatically be like, well, we go to the AFC Championship game every year. It's just like, that's like, again, like that's not necessarily the conversation that's being had right now. Because again, that's very much like, in a lot of ways, when you're having these conversations, you're having an individual conversation about individual players. You're talking about team success. You're talking about one side of the ball success. Like it's a lot more complicated than just being like, well, we made it to, said Super Bowl or won the Super Bowl, whatever it may be. Because it's like the Chiefs offense wasn't very good in the AFC Championship game against the Baltimore Ravens, and yet they won. And not to mention that offense wasn't very good, but in key moments, it was elite and exactly what you needed. With an elite play call, an elite catch, an elite throw. It was perfect. The one pass, I forget exactly who it was, to ice the game. A beautiful play call from Andy Reid and a beautiful catch and throw from Patrick Mahomes and whoever caught it. I forget the receiver. Travis Kelce having like a backwards diving catch. Like, in those moments, that was the best offense in the NFL. But it clearly was not the best offense in the NFL. So it's like, that's where football gets crazy. But those are just my thoughts. I'd absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think about the Kansas City Chiefs being predicted to have only the 10th best offense and it being an insult? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment, so whether you agree with me or disagree with me, either way, let's get in some discussions, let's get in some fights, but ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing, as we're building an amazing community here, and I'd absolutely love to see you part of it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much. See you next time.